They were, but I was experienced.
Councilor Burnt, can you hear us okay?
I had the biggest was about 20.
Brent, can you hear us?
Yeah, he's working on his mute.
He's working on his mute.
Yeah, he's got that one.
We can hear you.
Okay, I can hear you, but yeah, my mute was not accessible to me until just a second ago.
Okay, work session. August 18th, call to order. Okay, first thing we're going to do is talk about the contingent land transfer agreement. Is that all right with everybody?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, you want to read it? You want to give us a synopsis of it? Since we have a new council member?
Well, sure. The synopsis about this, and I don't have it in front of me right now, but I'll grab it, is that this agreement was made between the ownership of the property in the city of Deerheart, and with the idea that if they came into the city of Deerheart or into the city of Deerheart's urban growth boundary, and able to use our zoning to build their neighborhood, that they would reciprocate by donating land to the city of Deerheart of almost 5 acres. Half of which would be for a elevated site for a future fire station. The other half of it approximately would be used for a park that was between Pine Ridge Drive neighborhood and this neighborhood. That agreement has expired because it was set to expire after the election. And seeing as how the election turned out the way that it did, so far it has not been, that agreement has not been ratified. I believe they are working on a new agreement pending the information and the desire of the council moving forward from this meeting. Does that summarize it okay for you?
Right, but we are not making any decisions tonight.
No.
So it will just be a discussion of what we saw on our little walkabout. If anyone's got any questions or comments about something. And we'll hear from cottages if you guys are willing to say you're going to expand, or let's say not expand, but extend. Thank you for the word. Extend the agreement.
That's our plan.
It's your plan. And it's a contingent, a timeline contingent.
Probably something reasonable. I think that needs to be, we can discuss that with Chad and see what you guys think's reasonable.
Okay. All right. Peter, do you have anything to add to this?
Mike, who's done a great job representing the landowners on planning, is on vacation this week. Though I can have a conversation with him early next week. And what we've talked about is if this is something that the owners and the city both want to pursue, I think some economic analysis has been drawn up on that regarding what the benefits to the city are from a taxation standpoint, My conversations with Mike and my understanding is that if the city doesn't want to move forward, or if we're unable to do this swap in a reasonable amount of time, then the property owners would be able to move forward with the county zoning. And my understanding is that they've bought some density bonuses as well. So they would be able to put in some more units than just what would be the minimum acres allowed under that county zoning. The cons of that would be less houses. I think most people are in agreement if not everyone is in agreement, we're in a housing emergency. The city would not receive any property tax revenue because these houses will be built in unincorporated Clatsop County. We would receive less water revenue and all that, all that associated with that as well. So I think the numbers that I've seen, the annual hit to the city just from property taxes is projected to be around 80,000 that we would be missing out on, as well as less homes, longer connections for the water in between the existing homes than would be. And of course, we wouldn't get either the public park or the other property that could be used for public purposes. And I think with the owner's permission, we'd want to draft that language a little bit more broadly so that the neighborhood association understands that the parcel adjacent to them would be a park. That was always a plan. But, in the event that there wasn't a fire bond passed or what have you, or in the interim, that the city could use that second parcel in some manner that would benefit the city or the public. And so I think if the city wants to move forward and so do the property owners, those are kind of the parameters that we'd be looking at. We'd need to coordinate with county planning. A lot of that's already happened in order to ensure that we had enough time to go through the process. But again, it would require the mutual agreement of the council as well as the applicant. The other thing is that we've heard from some conservation organizations that would like to be at the table having those conversations. That, of course, I think would benefit everyone. We're not talking about a dense development even under the city zoning. And there are, well-established setbacks from riparian areas and everything like that. But I think that those would be very positive conversations to have with those sort of stakeholders, and they're certainly interested in that. So we would be looking at that as well.
Thank you, Peter.
I'd like to add one more thing. Mr. Mayor, you indicated that it terminated with the fire bond vote. I don't believe that is the case. Paragraph 3.2 on termination just has a straight 12-month termination unless extended. The fire bond was never, ever associated with this. They are two independent, although somewhat related issues, but the passage of a bond was not tied to this agreement.
And that is true. It was the timing that was set up to work along with the
I
elections.
believe the agreement expires on August 23rd.
Right, that's what's on the first page.
Yeah. That's 12 months from the date of the agreement. So it has not yet expired.
Okay, thank you for that, Brian. Does anyone want to speak about what we saw?
I perhaps in a little bit after I've continued gathering information through this process, it's a possibility.
Okay. Well, I thought it was a great looking property myself. I don't see a downside to it. A nice park adjacent to the butterfly habitat is a great thing. And the upper lot, the one that was at one time going to be for the fire station, I think that's a great location for a lot of things the city could do in the future. Having said that, we are not making any decisions. So if you've got a comment or you've got something to speak to on, let's say, what we could benefit for the city as far as the tax, the money, there's a dead end at the top of, is it Pine Ridge?
Yeah, that is a Pine Ridge Drive.
At Pine Ridge Drive, and we have another water line that's on the Highlands Road, and we could actually tie into that if we put a line across this property, and which would give us a loop, which makes a redundancy as far as being able to maintain a water flow if there's a break, and to isolate certain sections so we can replace them with the new HDPE pipe, which is now the going concern for people on the coast and then earthquake-prone zones. There's also the benefit for the Pine Ridge people to get out of the stagnant water syndrome, where it just sits in the pipe when they're gone. And if you've ever had stagnant water coming out of your faucet, you know it. It smells and tastes bad. Anybody? Austin, you want to talk about?
If it goes to the county, it stays in the county, would they be connected to our water system?
I can answer that. We had previously looked at the health benefits of providing city water to this. And as the mayor stated, it would allow us to loop our system and add redundancy to our system. And so we had, prior to this ever becoming a consideration as a site for the fire station, we had let the owners know that we would provide city water to them. That was under the county zoning with the density bonuses, I believe. The owners can correct me if I'm wrong.
And can we do that under the comprehensive plan?
Yes,
For the health of the system and the safety.
it's a public health benefit. We can provide water outside of the city.
Okay.
So I do have a question. So you're saying regarding the water that they can continue a water line from our current location to this area, is this correct?
Right, there's a water line that ends
Right.
right here, and then it'll just go straight across and tie into our North Warrenton ties.
So we're not talking about putting a road through there, is this?
No,
Okay.
no, just a water line.
All right, because I know that some of our citizens were concerned that they're gonna discontinue the road from Shamrock Pines over, and they were concerned about that, so I just wanted to make sure.
And I think that's a valid concern as well. The neighborhood had talked to us several times, and we had a meeting with the homeowners association. Then they said that at the homeowners association, whatever this is worth, that they would support the idea as long as there wasn't a road.
Right.
The road in Pinehurst Drive was built back when it was within the county as well. And it wasn't designed to take really any more traffic than the area.
Okay.
So with the traffic that would occur, which would be the Highlands, the Palisades, Mallard Court, Teal, and the beach could potentially go through this neighborhood, come through Pine Ridge Drive. So the city, I don't think should advocate for that connection.
So because this area is not gonna be used for a fire station, what are the city's plans? Are it just to build homes?
We don't have
You don't have
any
any plans?
No.
Okay.
But I can tell you that the location would be ideal to put in secondary water wells,
Mhm.
because according to the new study, the earwax
The resiliency plan. for the water
Mitigation.
system, yes.
right, for the water system, if you had a chance to look at it, they talk about saltwater intrusion after a tsunami event and a subduction.
Mhm.
So it would put us farther away from the ocean,
Mhm.
and it would put us on higher ground so we could protect the water system.
It certainly is a lovely site. It just really is.
And maybe recover quickly if there were a problem,
Recover quicker.
services.
Yeah,
More quickly. Also, I noticed in the comprehensive plan, it says in there on page 13 that we're supposed to secure, the city was supposed to secure use of appropriate land above the tsunami inundation zone for temporary housing, business, community functions. Should there be an event, would this meet that need?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on, what hazard that we're talking about, but if we look at, wind, weather, storm, ice, those are the things that are in our hazard mitigation plan, and especially tsunami. And so in a tsunami, the estimations that came out of DLCD were that this space would be dry in 95% of all probability. They gave a range in there,
Right.
But it was a good site. It's got the elevation, and we don't have that anywhere else. We do have the park, but that was definitely not a popular idea when we tried that first time. We tried with the Murphy property that was up there. That didn't work out. And so this really is one of the last places available other than condemnation, but I don't think the city wants to get into that.
Right. Well, but regardless of whether it were to become a fire station or not, whether we were to ever get money for a fire station, having this property would give us another option.
Yes.
And in my experience, having worked a number of large events, I've worked floods, I've worked fires, I've worked, you name it. And your best laid plans, sometimes, nothing works out and you have to move your incident command post, you have to move where you have people based on the situation, the scenario. So in my experience, the more places you have available and more options you have, the better off you are.
It's really part of a resiliency bell curve. We're going along our every day and everything is fine. And if the Cascadia, using that as an example, if the Cascadia subduction zone happens, all of our communities are going to go down. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be high. The ones that bounce back the fastest will be the ones that are most prepared and have the most options. And I think your heart is really lucky to have the dunes and things that we do have here. It really kind of provides us with some protection that is advantageous. And this would be that as well if you chose to go for it.
So just so I'm clear, because I wrote this down and I want to make sure I put a yes or a no on this. So the question is, yes, that would meet that goal under the comprehensive plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
One of the things that came up was the buildable lands inventory and where we sit as a city, meeting state requirements for having, was it 20 years of inventory available for expansion. I'm under the impression that we are getting close, or we are past or below that threshold to meet state requirements. Is that correct?
By my estimations, yes. So when we first did the buildable lands inventory, they estimated 701 or 700 and some lots that were available in Gerhart. We ground truthed that, went around and really took out a lot of lots that were developed or undevelopable for various reasons, mostly because of our zone code where you have 2 5,000 square foot lots that need to be combined and things like that. That is, they did not go into that depth. It was not that big of a study. We took it a little bit further and looked at those and ground truthed it. So in our estimations at this point, we had about close to maybe 400 available lots. If we're building, houses at approximately 20 per year, yet we do not have a 20-year supply. And we're down, I think, to about 370 lots by our calculation, somewhere there.
The other question I had about with the water on that end is, and I haven't looked at our, because we just updated our water conservation plan, our water.
We're in the process of updating the document.
Yeah, so do we have a threshold on our ability to supply water to how many units? I mean, it basically, we're talking about with the county, it's, probably 20 to 21 houses in this site. If we're talking bringing into the city urban growth boundary, we're talking about maybe 40 houses. So I'm just curious, that's almost double the amount of water usage. So are we if we were to do either or, are we reaching a threshold that we are concerned about with our water usage?
There's two projects in there. There's this one and the one that we're working on the side. So in regards to our water treatment facility, when it was built with 2 skid units. Those are the filtration units that came from Siemens at the time. We built the building, the council decided to build a building that would house 3 skid units. So currently, we're able to provide all the water that we need, except for the summertime due to restrictions with the permit because of the neocoxy. So we're down on restrictions. We do have the capacity to take care of these homes here. But on the other side, we're also working on a project where we're actually wanting to come to the council here in the near future to talk about the next skid unit, to add that in. And the reason that we need it is after operating for 11 years, the redundancy and the wear and tear on the 2 skid units and the maintenance of that issue. The third one would make us much more efficient. We are looking at the possibility of using the ARA funds for something like that as well, to do that project, which will take care of more than half of it. So we will be updating our water system in the future for the redundancy, as long as the council agrees with our project. But yeah, currently, I mean, we've been bringing in 20 houses over the last 4 years, and we've been able to adequately take care of that. The system is not stressed in a way that we're able to provide that water. It's just because of the reduced amount, because of the neocoxy river, that we're not producing water all year round.
Right.
We would need this 3rd skid unit at this time if we were to provide water all year round for the city of Gearhart. That would be a requirement, just in efficiency, maintenance, and redundancy.
And we would also need that if we increase, if we increase the number of homes and we include the homes that are proposed.
No, it wouldn't tip us over to where we need another skid unit. We would be able to provide water.
So as it stands right now, you feel confidently that we could.
Yes.
Okay.
Have you thought about,
75% of their water.
Right.
Not during the summer.
Right, with the exception of summers.
Yeah.
have you thought about implementing system development fees to help pay for this?
I mentioned that to Councilor Brent today. We need to go over our system development charges, our water meter installation charges, and potentially water rates in the future as well. Just because we have not seen an increase in the system development charges and
Right.
rates in many, many years, probably close to 20. And we've been providing people with water for $39 for every 2 months. And we've been able to do that because we are efficient. But with the cost increases over the last few years, we're going to have to look at that. System development charges and water meter charges, I believe we are the least expensive city to do building business in the county, if not most of Oregon at this point. We're very low. So that is something we need to talk about.
So systems development fees would not be retroactive. They would just begin when we decided to have them established.
That's why timing is going to be important,
Okay.
yes. And those could help with when a neighborhood comes in or various lots come in to put more money into our reserve account for future upgrades.
Sure. Okay.
Steve?
Well, what does one of those skid units cost?
We just priced one out of about 660,000, somewhere near there, around 600,000. We thought they were $1 million. It actually didn't turn out to be that at all. And then we have the ARA funds that we would likely be able to use for that, which is about 300,000, depending on how the council decides to use it. 330,000, but
The ARA is.
oh, excuse me, the American Rescue Act. These were the COVID funds that were delivered to cities through the what, Chad? I'm sorry.
The build back, no, I know.
Yeah. Yeah, it was called the American Rescue Act.
So just, again, new person, sorry, I'm gonna ask for clarification. So what you're saying is that we need to do that independent of our decision on this. That's gonna be something down the road, but this could also factor. But just doing this is not, or not doing this is not going to prevent us from having to have that same conversation.
That is
down the road.
correct.
So just so I'm clear, we're not gonna cause everybody's costs to go up just because we're adding more.
No,
Okay.
no, I don't think. it'd be
They might go
because we're
up, but
adding
it's a whole separate issue from this and they might go up anyway.
one. Yes,
They will be going up. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Definitely the lowest water rates.
But saying no to this doesn't stop that from happening.
No, that's still something that we're heading towards, you know, again, for the health of the system. I'm really good at what we got and to be able to maintain what we have a little bit better.
What are those, where did you call them again? The
It's a microfiltration skid unit.
skid unit.
And the reason why they call it a skid unit
Yeah, why
is
is it called a skid?
it's built on a frame that basically the whole thing can come in on a forklift.
Oh,
That's why that big brown door on the wrong side of the building is there, to be able to get the skid units in and out of that area. And so when, and I would like to do a field trip to the water treatment facility here in the near future, there is a space available for it, where it would be plumbed in. We would have to do some other system upgrades within that building, but it would be a project likely under 800,000.
So the current two are just, they're meeting our capacity to filter through that system.
There are in June, which is probably our busiest month where we can provide all the water.
Yeah.
They're working hard, you
Yeah.
know, but they're working fine. And the reason that we want the third one is to be able to shut one down and do some serious maintenance on it, whereas we defer that until the slower season, the summer season, to do these kind of maintenance. Right now, we're looking at replacing all the filters in, I believe, one, maybe two of both machines. And that's just an ongoing maintenance cost.
Yeah.
And those costs, the ongoing maintenance cost, the operation cost, the cost of chemicals, the cost of electricity, all that has gone up, but the prices have gone. So yeah, the skid unit is something that Mark has been talking about for over a year now, outside of this conversation.
I have some questions that I've heard from citizens, or I've seen posted from citizens. There's been some question about whether there are archaeological sites out there. Can we get some clarification on that and some assurance that that would be handled in keeping with our comprehensive plan also, which I think has something specific about how those are being handled?
It may or may not be a requirement. It depends on how things are listed in the particular area where there's known sites or possible sites. Now, for example, when we built the 10th Street Bridge on for the 9th and 10th Street Bridge, the Duncan Crossing for the Ridge Path, there we had to go for a wetlands permit, and that went through the Army Corps of Engineers, the state of Oregon, and the local tribes. There was some lore that there might be some mitten sites or what have you in the area, and because there's also stories about the Ridge Path, whether or not it was used in the past by Native Americans, we're not absolutely sure. So they told us to do a dig. We hired somebody, they didn't find anything. So that might be a requirement for here, but we're not moving towards any wetlands. So I don't, I'm not sure.
That was a federal requirement that for the Duncan Crossing, so they require a cultural resources evaluation for that. And we can require that of the developers if we so see fit, but I don't think it would fall under any regulations by the state or the
Right, but then my question would be, whose responsibility for that? Are we responsible for that? Is the builder responsible for that? The builder.
Yeah, well, yeah.
In the end of 2018, we had prepared a submittal to the county to get this going on our lots. And my question that the attorney was talking about is a plan. He was a planner for Clatsop County, and some of you guys might remember when he was. But now he's the head of the city up there in
King City.
King City, yeah. But we had everything covered. We were ready to turn in. The whole submittal was done. I believe we've done all those studies. I would be more than happy to furnish Chad a copy. It's thick. It's gonna, sit down and read for a while, but it's all done.
Okay, yeah, I would like to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, cultural resources studies usually aren't involved in developments unless there's some significant areas that are being disturbed. So unless it's been identified as a site, it won't be.
Okay. And then I think there was some question about traffic studies, which I think they're being performed.
Yes. They're being done right as we speak.
Okay.
They shouldn't be. Lancaster Mobley, I talked to them today, we had paid them before the fire bond failed to get started on it, and then we told them to hold off. So they have got some work done, they're gonna finish it up in the next few weeks, and they said they're hoping to have it done by the 20th September.
Okay, so by the end of the next month-ish
Yeah, they
is
said
when
by
you
the end of
anticipate
next
that?
month for sure.
Okay,
And they actually called Chad today, I believe, to get some information.
Yes.
okay. So we've already talked about water, we talked a little bit about the lot size, there's a question about whether or not we can take it into our urban growth boundary line, if it's designated as agricultural land at the moment, is that allowed?
R2.
So it's R2, it is not, okay, but you're confident that if you went to the county, you could build 21 lots?
Yes,
Okay,
1 acre lots.
21 1-acre lots. And then one last thing, since, I mean, it's no secret that the fire bond did not pass. And that nobody here at this table knows if that would ever even be a site for the fire station or a fire station. Can we remove any reference to it so that it clears that up? And I mean, I'm not saying that we would prohibit it, I mean, we have to acknowledge it didn't pass, people didn't like it, or whether it's because it was that location, whether there's a number of reasons, and we're still creating a needs assessment and gathering information about that. I'd hate to leave the specific wording in there unless there's some reason why we have to, and then I need to know that reason.
That is true.
We'd like to distance ourselves from the fire department ourselves.
So you would.
Good. And that's an easy fix.
Well, the question is if we do renew this agreement, are we gonna have a chance to redline it or to do anything?
Yeah, you will have to approve the agreement,
Okay,
and there will be a meeting,
Okay.
and then there can be conversations, there can even be a work session.
right.
Well, and as this expires on the 23rd, and we don't have anything planned between now and then, I mean, there's gonna be a sunset on this and a new agreement if one is reached.
That would be the way it would work, yes.
Okay, I think there were some questions.
Yeah,
about
one
that.
agreement would expire, and you can enter into any agreement that the two parties would come up with, the city of your heart and that.
So am I correct in assuming that the public does not vote on this?
No,
I don't believe so, I'm gonna ask Peter to elaborate on
That's a
that.
great question.
right, this isn't something the public would vote on. This is a administrative contractual issue between the city and a landowner. And I've actually litigated this point before in Washington County because we do not have final say on whether or not the urban growth, when I say we, I mean you as the city council, do not have final say on whether this happens, because it has to be approved by DLCD/LCDC. So the Department of Land Conservation and Development is DLCD. I shouldn't use so many acronyms. They have the final say regarding this, and it's a technical decision that is made by them. We have had preliminary conversations with them. They're aware of where we would be moving urban growth boundary from, which is west of the state's no build line. So you can't build west of a certain point on the map. And they're aware that this is the likely place it would go. It's the only obvious place that hasn't been developed. There's nothing that could be developed to the south. There are major issues regarding liquefying soil that are between the eastern edge of the city and kind of the hill. And then the north is developed not at urban levels of density, but at county neighborhood levels of density. So we feel like this is probably the only area that's outside of our UGB where we could move that UGB. So from west of the no build line to this site, the zoning for the UGB that we would be moving is the city's R1 residential. And the state statute requires that it be zone for zone. So one of the questions we had with DLCD staff was, is there some flexibility? So if maybe the property owner or the city wanted a little higher density, that we could do that. And the answer is no. It would have to be the city's R1 zoning because that's what we're trading out. And so it needs to be a net zero. So R1 for R1, acre for acre. That's what the state would be looking for and what would be most likely approved.
But if my understanding is correct, again, sorry, new guy, in order to get that into our urban growth boundary, a lot of everybody keeps calling it UGB, so say UGB, there is public participation required in that process. Is that correct? Or there would be public participation in that process?
Always. So anything land use based in Oregon, it's called Oregon Land Use Goal 1, which is public participation. So there would be an opportunity for the public to participate in front of the city council. There would also be an opportunity for them to participate in front of the county. So there'd be multiple opportunities for public participation and to make sure that the public had accurate information regarding what's happening. And what's happening would be that nobody would be losing any property, that the urban growth boundary is an imaginary line, but we know where it is because we can point to it on a map. You just can't physically see it if you're standing on the ground. And the state's no build line is also kind of an imaginary line in that you can be standing in someone's backyard and looking right across the no build line, but there's physically nothing that's there. And so there's no property rights that would be changed, no land that would be given up. We'd be merely trading out urban growth boundary, which the city, it's ours that we kind of own, if you can own something imaginary, and then moving it to another place where it would then be. And as part of that, the properties would then be annexed into the city so that we would get city property taxes on them. The developers will be able to develop at an R1 residential designation, and we would receive approximately 5 acres, approximately half for a public park, and then the other half, everyone's absolutely right, we'd want to tweak that language so it could be used for a public purpose. So whether that was a site for resiliency or whatever it is, water, any public purpose, but also to be signaling to the public that, you know, the city's not getting into the development game. We're getting property in order to benefit members of the public.
And then, I'm sorry, my last question, then I promise I'll be quiet. The septic system, it's my understanding that'll be on you folks and between you and the county. We have nothing to do with whether or not you can do septics. This agreement does not require that you be able to get septic. Okay.
Well, my question was regarding the density rights. Did you address that and say that you have more density rights?
Yeah, if we went through the county process.
Right. Well, if you do acquire more density rights, does that mean that the current density of 1 acre lots will be altered?
You can't go below 1 acre.
Okay, so what
And
would more density
The
rights
21,
include?
the 21 lots is,
Mhm.
we're maxed out.
Okay,
Because you have to put 30% aside for open space.
sure.
And then you take the rest of the property divided into 1 acre lots, minus wetlands.
Okay, so the fact that you're able to procure more density rights doesn't really have any, okay, thank you very much.
We're up to our max.
Okay.
For the county.
Sure.
Any other questions? Brent, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I've taken a look at the number side of the equation. So I've done a little spreadsheet based on some assumptions, and some of the information that I've used is a little dated, so they may not be exact. But rough numbers, I did calculations based on 22 homes under the county zoning, and calculated 45 homes under Gerhardt's zoning. I used a 20% estimated profit margin. So I haven't gotten any proprietary information out of our guests. But that was just a pretty conservative, generous percentage based on my experience. So that gives, under the county, they'd make a net, or I'm sorry, a gross profit of about 4.4 million under the county and about 8.1 million under the city. However, under the city's program, we'd be getting about a $4 million value in the land transfer. Between the one-time building and plumbing permit fees and water meter hookups, we'd be receiving about $390,000 in one-time fees. And then assuming a under the city, 900,000 average sales price for those 45 homes and a tax assessed value of 720,000, that would result in about $80,000 per year annual city tax revenue. And also the additional water fees would be about a little over $10,000 per year at $39 every 2 months. So, and I did want to say that even under the county, if we're supplying water outside the city of Gerhart, outside the city, they pay a higher water rate than within the city because they are not paying on our water bond. So their rate, instead of $39, it's $58.50 every 2 months. So anyhow, there's lots of sources of both one-time and ongoing income that we would be foregoing if we did not pursue this with our developer guests here today.
Thank you, Brent. Well, is there any other questions that need answer or any more talk that needs talking?
Christine, on that.
The what?
Sorry.
Kristen.
Oh,
I think that that does answer all my questions.
Rita, are you done?
I'm done, thank you.
Austin?
Did you talk at all, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, about, kind of the relationship to the neocoxy? Did you want to cover?
No, we're not going in there.
Okay.
Right now, since nothing is.
So, gotcha.
All right. Well, I believe.
Well, maybe not with regard to the proximity to the creek, but just general groundwater contamination from septic systems. So you already have the capacity to do 21 or 22 homes under the county. If that bumps up to approximately double that number, the modern septic systems that you're installing, is that going to cause an environmental hazard with the groundwater?
Well, I think so.
So I've dealt with DEQ quite a bit, we're DEQ installers and then through several subdivisions. And from what they're telling me is these newer sand filter systems that we're installing is, even though there's more housing going in, the water quality is getting better because we're getting rid of a lot of these old cesspools around the Gerhart area. So as far as I know, the water quality is supposedly getting better, not worse, with more building, just because of the new systems that are out.
Part of that is also the flushing action of us actually pulling water from our wells. Water quality salinity is improving, as they said. But also, we have not had any positive tests in nitrates in all of the tests that we've done here for the city. So even though what we have in our septic systems, we don't have any tests that show that they are down into the aquifer that we are in.
Fortunately, we
Great.
have so much sand, you know, that sand really helps clean it up.
Great to hear because citizens do have concern about our water and sounds like we're in good shape.
You know what I didn't write down was or I think we lost the train that thought we were going, the tracks we were going down with that train about the skid. You said we had approximately half the amount that we would need to replace it. You think it's about 600 and we have ARA funds of 300-ish?
Correct. So if we use the ARA funds, depending on what type of projects we want, it might be a portion of this ARA fund to go into this, and maybe the city council will decide to do another project as well. So however you spend the funds, but those 330 are available, and I do believe that this project would be allowable through that. There's still some interpretation coming in, but it's looking like it's water infrastructure is some of the easier applications. So not only that, but the city of Deerheart, we have reserve accounts. Every year we put money into these reserve accounts that include public works, police car, fire truck. I mean, this is why we don't have to go to the voters for police cars, because we've saved the money for that type of allocation. I didn't look it up, I'm sorry, but do you have any estimate of what we have in the water?
It's over $1 million.
We have probably $1.25 million, at least if not $1.5 million in a water reserve fund that is also to be used for these type of projects.
Okay.
And we have some work to do with that. We have some water main replacement that we want to do, so we do have to be careful.
Right, we
But
have
this-
other things to use that money for, so.
But this ARA is a nice help, and we take a good chunk out of it.
So the ARPA funds, which is the American Recovery Protection Act, the three items of infrastructure that can absolutely be used upon complete safe harbor are water pipe type of projects, are broadband projects, and then sewer projects. So we don't have sanitary sewer here, but anything as far as water resiliency, and when they passed it, it was kind of with part of the idea of like communities with lead pipes, but anything that makes water cleaner or safer for consumers is within and they published final guidelines on the use of that funds. That happened about 5 or 6 weeks ago. And so this sort of thing would be absolutely within the parameters of that program.
Right, I understand that, I'm just cataloging everything, we're moving faster towards that goal of need, or towards that need. We're gonna have to start looking at the money and where the money's gonna come from, so I just.
We're working on that project here in the city now, and to present to the council.
Okay,
Which might be our next time.
right. Okay, well, if there's no more questions and no more talk about the land transfer, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. If you would like to leave, we're going to go on to something more mundane. So thank you very much for coming by.
Thank you.
Right, well, we have about 12 minutes, 13 minutes. You want to go over this procurement paperwork? All you have to do is say yes or no. Oh, really?
Yes.
All right, so Chad, you want to go give us a synopsis of the what you got?
I will do. Do you want me to read the staff report from the meeting that we had in August where you tabled this issue?
Sure.
And again, that was the case. So the synopsis in this is a resolution for the city's current ordinance on procurement. It was initially adopted in 1976. And we were proposing an ordinance to update and streamline the city's procurement process by adopting the state procurement laws, save time and money for the city. In the example of what is classified as small procurement, the current city code requires informal quotes and written quotes for public goods and services, public improvements and or personal services in the amount of $5,000 or less. Oregon law allows direct purchase without a competitive process at 10,000 or less. So if adopted, ordinance 934 will change our small procurement process, currently limited to 5,000 and change over to 10,000 less. Then there's the intermediate procurement. Current city code requires formal quotes for professional services and public goods and services at between 5,000 and 10,000, whereas the state law for intermediate purchases allows 5,000 to 25,000. Ordinance 934 would change the intermediate purchasing to the state allowed amount range. And then there's the large procurement. Gearhart requires a formal, competitive, sealed proposal from 10,000 and above, whereas the state law requires formal, sealed bids for procurement starting at exceeding 150,000 and above. Ordinance 934 would align those large purchasing with the law as well. So really, we're trying to just streamline things. When the ordinance was designed, it was a different time. Things cost a little bit less than they do now. So you had options to approve this ordinance, motion to approve or do nothing. And what the council did, and in order to spend more time with it and with a few concerns, we tabled it until we could have this work session. And so city staff is interested in hearing about some of the suggestions or questions that you have.
Shall I just call on each counselor and you can tell us what your thoughts are? How's that? Brent, you're up.
Okay. I'm always in favor of utilizing safe harbors whenever possible. And if the state says that this is permissible and it streamlines the process, and our outside accounting firm is fine with it because it's totally kosher with the state, then I think we should adopt it.
Okay. Rita?
Did the procurement required by the state or amended by the state, this goes for the large cities as well as the small cities, is that correct? So Portland would have, $250,000, but well, 150, and we'd still have the same, even though we're much, much smaller. Is that
Yes.
correct? And I don't know if you can answer this, but I will ask Ms. Justine. Do you know about how many of the large procurements and the intermediate procurements we have in a year? And I don't expect you to have the answer to that. I just thought you just would flip it off the top of your head.
Maybe one or two
Large ones?
large
Okay.
or over 150,
And how many medium ones?
based on the states or based on based on our current
Based on
procurement.
our current.
Yeah, we probably have 100 at least.
Okay, and
Maybe more.
my last question, and I don't understand it, on this little table that you gave us, and when you said, the procurement method, you have public goods and services, public improvement, and then personal service. What is personal service?
That would be like a consultant of some kind. They provide a service versus buying a product or a piece of equipment.
That makes
Would
sense.
that be our building inspector? Is that personal
That's a
services?
personal
essentially, yes.
service. Mhm.
Okay, well, those were my questions. Thank you.
Dana, new person?
Yeah, new person. So what top 3 benefits of doing this, top 2 benefits of doing this? Why do we want to do this?
I'll throw out a couple and then I'll also let Justine do this, because she's really done some studying. But, essentially, I'll give you an idea. We've got one for PSI Water Technologies right now, which is a quote to fix a very important piece of equipment that broke. It's called, it's a chlorine generator. And it is at $5,900, $5,900. Currently, with that, we'd be in the intermediate portion with the city. And the procurement would take the time through formal quotes being putting together the entire package, listing out what it is that we require, sending it out to as many people as possible in the public, receiving those back, advertising would be in there as well, could be. And so that takes a lot of time. And it's a $6,000 piece of equipment that we need now. And so there are emergency provisions for that. But the cost of operating a water system, and to kind of key in on what you were talking about, you know, $150,000 is for big cities and small cities. Doesn't make our water system costs any different. You know, we do have expenses that are just like a big city. It's just done with a small budget. Now, none of this would predicate you folks being involved with it. It has nothing to do with us just spending the money. There's a process that where you would approve it anyway. So it's, you know, there's really some safe backs, except for like the small and intermediate. We do need those bumps because of price differences, and for us to be nimble and be able to get the price in a quick enough manner for us to do business. That would help us out as well. You know, for the larger items, we would have to go either to a vote of the people or to the reserve accounts, which you have to make that decision. But the formal quote process and especially the sealed process takes a lot of time, and it hinders us to do that work.
Okay.
Also, with some of these processes, it doesn't mean you're going to get the best deal by going through them. There is a formal sealed bid process where you're accepting these and you're choosing one as you open it together. It doesn't mean it's the cheapest way to do that. That's just the price that the 3 or 4, whatever, gave you. And then you're accepting it. Now, of course, the council can reject something because they think it's too expensive. But that particular process, having to go with formal quotes within the state's intermediate range, really slows us down. It also hinders companies from maybe doing business with us because there's that longer process as well, which they don't have to do anywhere else. Well, I can't say that for sure. Most places in Oregon, they don't have to do that. So there's staff time, it's their time, expenses can go up, and we're not able to react to some of the projects that we need to react.
Would this allow some of our smaller local businesses to be more competitive in getting our money from our city? Is that what
Well, I hadn't thought about that, but I think the easier that you know, if it's an easier process, it's easier for people to participate.
Okay.
You know, some of the smaller local areas may not want to get into the sealed process bid, or I don't know, but that could be.
Right. And I mean, the other concern in at times when I've gone out to bid on things, the other concern is not necessarily just the cheapest, but because the cheapest is not always going to be the best quality. So that would be, okay.
Yeah, and then maybe Justin, you can elaborate on the others as well.
I think, you know, procurement is something that we need to improve on. It's been in our audit twice. We probably will have another comment on it this year. And so when you go to trainings, when you look at 60-page documents, when you look at 6-page documents, they're all based on what the state procurement rules are. Contracts are based on state procurement. You know, companies, larger companies that you work with, they have already set those standards and base them off of the state ORSs because it's just more convenient, it's easier, it's more consistent. And I think that it would help our staff when they're in trainings, when they hear things, to have the consistent message of we're following the state guidelines. You know, the state has put these in for a reason. They feel like they're adequate for cities that have 100, cities that have 2 million. And I want to set them up to succeed. And by making so many, they can't remember if that's 5,000 or 8,000. And when they talk to somebody says, oh no, that this is fine, you can do it up to this. And I just think it would be easier overall to have a consistent message with what the state and our auditors say.
So you think that we should go with this? It could be easier for the city.
I think that it would be better to follow the state of Oregon's
Understood.
ORSs than to make them more restrictive.
Well, I agree that times has changed since our last ordinance regarding this. And that inflation has really upped everything. So I would be okay with some raises in money. I think our current small is way too small. I think at least should be at least 10,000. I'm not sure about the other categories, but I'm open to hearing what the other counselors think.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would probably agree with you on that one. I think 10,000 is a good lower limit for a lot of that smaller procurement items, but basically what I'm reading is though is that we're actually making it easier for even local companies, because of the large procurement, we currently require a seal proposal of 10,000. So we're raising it to 150,000, so we're giving these local people actually a better chance of participating in the process. Working with state and federal grants currently in my own position, I know that we have to go through this process regardless, so being consistent with either state or federal limits and requirements is probably the best way to go, especially because we're a city and we receive a lot of federal and state grants. So I think I'm indifferent to whether or not raising that small limit, just because if it's currently in the ORS code, then I think we should keep it. And I'm also interested in the special exemption. A lot, it looks like a lot of the city might actually be doing, we might have a lot of exemptions available to us in this process, so.
Correct. And the special exemptions are actually in our current city code.
Yeah.
They are listed in there under exceptions, and it's one of the only sections that it just lists exceptions, and then it just basically lists the ORS, and it doesn't have any in-depth language or in the actual city code.
But it doesn't in the ORS item itself.
Yeah, each ORS has its own book.
Right, so you would
No,
refer to
no,
that
for
if
sure.
you're looking at exemption.
We would still have to follow all
Yeah.
of those, yeah.
So yeah, and then that gives you a lot of freedom though too, so, which is good. I think that gives you the ability to maneuver when you need to.
But we're very much still accountable to the city council.
Yeah.
If we start spending money willy-nilly, and going up into these large amounts, I'm sure you're gonna have some serious questions. We don't intend to make this so that we could spend more money. Our intention is to make this more economical, and it actually could save us time and money as well. Just by pulling, by using these processes and proposals is what they set for the state. It wasn't about a level of money that we can spend. Our budget dictates that.
Yeah, and it gives those contractors the thought too, that like there's other people that might be, guiding, so that the cost, as a market perspective, it will go down too, so we're saving money in that sense.
Okay, we've gone over our time limit, but I'm gonna ask Peter, do you have anything to add to this?
Just the trend that I'm seeing, and this just isn't in Gerhardt, it's in virtually every city, is we're getting less bidders on contracts. So it's not unusual, and I think Gerhardt's seen this, to put out an RFP and get maybe one proposal back. And so, one of my, obviously we need guardrails and we need to be transparent about how money's being spent and all that. But anything that's kind of a barrier to entry for companies, whether they're doing water pipes or anything, is going to make it less likely, I think, that they'll bid in Gerhardt. And the other thing is that all of the cities in Oregon got their ARPA funds at once. And we don't have that many brand new construction companies that are able to do this type of work. And so and we have a timeline for when we have to spend the money and what it can be used for. So it's taken an already tight market and made it even tighter. So, you know, if you feel like the state statutes are going to give us enough protections, and then it lowers the barrier of entry for companies. The other thing too is doing the public noticing for these sort of sealed big contracts requires multiple ads in newspapers, and it's not inexpensive. So those are the kind of considerations that I've seen other cities look at and looking at these issues and just the trends that I've noticed, particularly over the last 2 years.
All right, thank you, Peter. Any other questions or comments about the procurement process?
I was just gonna say RJ probably doesn't mind that the ads are expensive.
He is on the call.
Okay,
So if there's any other questions or information that you like about this, let us know and then we'll provide that. But we intend on bringing this back in some format to the city council in September. So it's not making a decision, but do you have any recommendations of changes that you would like to make to this so that we can work on those and bring you something that is more complete? Just a
Well,
recommendation.
Just the one that on the small, that I'd like to bump it up to 10,000. That was my only change I want to see.
So you would
Like I
leave-
said, I would like to hear from other counselors on these other two, what their monetary limits are. But right now, I don't have a good stand on that.
I'm not normally for a change if something's working, but if it's broken, we need to fix it, and we already have an example of the best practice that's being used widely across the state. And I'm usually most comfortable with going with what others have found to be best practices rather than trying to reinvent it. But I would bow with those more knowledgeable, or if you felt
Yeah,
strongly that we should deviate from what the state is recommending.
I think 10,000 is an acceptable number for that small one. I'm actually kind of curious about Peter's comment about the advertising.
It's probably about $230 to run a public notice.
And it takes a few days to get it in the paper because it's not run daily. And so
That's for the competitive seal.
That's
proposal?
for large.
It's required in there.
It's required that you do a public notice.
I thought that was if the work was being done, but, okay. Is it only one newspaper? Is it multiple newspapers?
Yeah, they recommend that you pick well, it would do, again, it could be a city's choice, but they recommend one for sure. But they would like to see you probably pick two, one that's like the DOJ, the larger one, not DOJ, the Department of Commerce newspaper, I can't think of the name, and then your local newspaper to give an opportunity for local.
And for those bigger projects, we would advertise to as many of the people as possible, get as many sealed bids as
Right.
possible to be able to do that. So when it was the water treatment facility, they went out and they went to American Water Works Association, they went to the League of Oregon Cities, they went to all sorts of things solicited as many bids as possible.
So this is anything over 150,000.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I think that's acceptable because you're gonna have to want to reach out as far as many people as you can. So,
And people watch those.
Yeah.
Like they're watching those
yeah,
to see if something hits it.
it's worth the cost to post it.
Yeah.
anything else?
Any other recommendations?
All right, meeting over.
Thank you.
Everyone, Brad, Peter.
Thank you.
Night, everybody.
Good night, Brent. We said all good night, but I had you on mute there for a second.
Right,